Welcome to the People Performance Podcast with me, Denise Castley.
And me, James Cooper.
Hi, James.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good. Ready to be back into the podcast room.
Always.
Always a good one with us, Denise. We're always pretty cool.
Yeah, always. And what are we talking about today, James?
We are talking about the energy distribution cycle. For everybody that's listening, the real sort of purpose behind this is, as we're talking through it, I want you to make the links for yourselves. When is it that you do what during your working days? Now, I don't know about you, Bernice, but just to introduce the energy distribution cycle as a tool to get a hold of, to understand, to actually implement for you, let's just have a look at the three elements of it first. And I'm interested to get your thoughts and the way that you feel around these three different parts of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what we can do. So the first one is peak, which usually, and there is no right or wrong answers, but peak normally happens on average between 8 and 12 o'clock.
Okay.
Now, for every single individual, there is a different energy distribution cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about understanding when people are at their best and that they're from an energy distribution point of view, to then think about, well, what do we do at peak?
Mm-hmm.
So as you're thinking now, Bernice, what do you normally do in the morning between 8 and 12?
So I suppose just a typical day, if I'm in the office, it might be that I start the day looking at emails. It might be that I have a look at the diary, see what have I got kind of coming up over the next day or the next few days or even the next couple of weeks ahead. So that's how I might spend my time. Or it might be that I'm actually working with a client, in which case at 9 o'clock I'm starting a workshop or I'm starting a coaching session, and it's all about kind of engaging people, taking people on a journey.
And that makes sense, right? Now, is there anything to just consider in that time frame where peak, and the name peak would suggest that you are at the top of your energy distribution cycle?
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that we might need to consider and might need to do moving forward to actually be a little bit more productive or be a little bit more effective in that time?
Yeah, and I think this is something that I'm sure you'll probably agree with this. When we are speaking to clients, working with them, whether it be on a one-to-one basis in coaching, whether it be actually working with a team in a workshop around how do we become more productive, the amount of people that say that the biggest challenge in their world is time and how they use their time, and that lack of time can then be what causes us to behave in unproductive ways. So it's important to understand how am I using it.
Okay, so thinking about a little bit after 12 o'clock then, and again, some variations for every individual. But the trough, which would suggest the sort of lower points of the energy distribution cycle, the trough is between 12 and 3.
Okay.
On average. Now, I'm going to get into mine and where mine sort of varies slightly. But in the trough, so think about the times between 12 and 3. What do we normally do? So let's just go to the very basics of humanity.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, what do you do around 12 o'clock?
First, very important, critical thing, eat.
Yeah, so eat, consume food, drink water, or other drinks are available. But understanding that it's about the body sort of taking on a bit more energy. And in the trough, that's where the energy would go towards digestion, and then all of a sudden you're not now at the top of your energy cycle, especially with high carb lunches and beige lunches, which again, you can pick whatever food you want to eat, but is that food is going into the system. So in the trough then, what normally happens, what do you normally do straight after lunch? Between so if we say we have a half an hour lunch at 12, go through to 12:30, what normally happens, when the reoccurring things that happen in offices up and down the country or even internationally as well?
Make a brew, make a cuppa, and then go sit down.
Yeah, sit down, don't really do too much.
And I think
I'm starting to feel a little bit lethargic. I'm starting to feel a little bit... Here we go again.
Yeah, and I think this for a lot of people, because they can think of on a typical day for most of us, there is that little bit of a window. Most of us, I mean, it's on average, it is in the afternoon at some point, but it's that moment where you feel as though everything's just a bit of a struggle.
Yeah.
You can feel that your energy is slightly lower at that point in day. But the reality is sometimes that's the moment of the day where all of our meetings are happening and we need to be really focused. Or is it that that's the moment in time where maybe my meetings have been all in the morning, now this is my focus time, but it's such an effort and it's so difficult. And I'm trying to get in the zone, but I've got a nice full belly and I'm just struggling a little bit.
And I think during winter, it does make it a little bit difficult for me because you feel that little bit of tiredness.
Yeah.
And you go, oh, I could just have a 10-minute nap.
Yeah.
When actually we have to do lots of things in this time. So my suggestion would then be, in the trough, is there any point in really doing some of the more important things in the trough? Why would that serve as well? Or is that something that we might need to consider as well as what we're doing in the peak? So as I'm talking again, what's going into your peak, what's in the trough and in that time of the day, there's a third part, which is the recovery. Yeah? And as you look at these three sections of the day, you can start to really think about, well, after 3 o'clock to around sort of 6, when some people, early birds, really go to bed. But if you think about 6, maybe even a little bit longer than that, how are you feeling from a professional point of view? Is that where you are generating ideas? Is that where some other idea comes in left field and you can now actually consider it? Whereas in the trough, he was nowhere even near getting a new idea put together.
Yeah.
He was actually in a situation where he was not struggling, but in that sort of lower energy part of the distribution cycle. But from that recovery part, which again, between 3 and 6, is when you can start to actually elevate some of the ideas, or maybe get a second wind, if you like. And I'll just share my example with you, Bernice, is that I'm very much peak early doors. I'm up and at them straight away. And then when I come into that trough around 1 or 2, obviously, and a really good touch point for everybody involved is we would have to really manage our energy distribution cycle, or our energy in general, especially if we're delivering on a day where we've been at peak, we've given everybody the energy, and I know we've referenced Tigger in the past, but understanding that if it is that you can go with that energy and keep that energy high, you go for lunch, and then we can see it, and we see it with some of the delegates, it's that, and we feel it as well, is that that energy distribution cycle is a little bit lower. We're in that trough, and now we just need to manage ourselves and kick back in.
Yeah.
And finally, after I've finished work, and some even the busy days that or everybody has, and the people that are watching this might have as well, is that what do you do after work? What are the things that you do before you come to work the next day? Is it you go and play some sport, you go to the gym, you've got children, you've got whatever extracurricular activities that might be out there? Everybody will do something, okay? Whether that is going back walking the dog for round number 2, or coming back in and actually doing a little bit of work on the night because you've been in a T2 workshop all day.
Yeah.
It might be that. What we're saying is it's not an exact science, but for every individual would have a slightly different energy distribution cycle.
Yeah.
So I'm like that, Bernice. I'm up really early. I then dip into the trough. And again, I do have the ability to really manage myself and influence the environment that I'm in. And then as a recovery element, as I'm leaving work, I'll probably go and do some football coaching on a night. And that's me. I do that most nights. But it's about understanding the impact that it has from an energy distribution cycle point of view. So just to consider yours then, Bernice. If me and you were to work together, you know, in my energy distribution cycle now, where would we be able to meet up, do you think? Where do you think would be sort of optimum performance for me and you?
So I would say definitely morning.
Yeah.
So my energy is I'm definitely a little bit slower on a morning. So I'm one of these where I like to gradually wake up. I can't just alarm goes off and I'm straight out of the bed. I don't work like that. I need a bit of moment, a bit of a time just to kind of slowly get out of bed. If I wake up and it's just alarm's gone off and it's pitch dark, I struggle with that. And that's when I just think, Not today, no, thank you. So that's one thing to for me. But then because I'm a slightly slower riser, when I get that real kind of peak moment on energy is definitely more when I'm actually in the office. So we start work at 8 o'clock most days. For me, I definitely would say my peak window would be from maybe kind of 9 onwards.
Okay.
I like that first hour just to kind of settle in. I can jump straight into stuff straight away, but I like to almost have a moment to sit back, focus, and then once I'm in it, I'm in.
Yeah. It's like that warm up, isn't it?
Yeah, I need a
Okay.
little warm up. I'm not like Tigger like you. I can't just,
No.
alarm goes off and I'm just straight in there and in it.
Okay, so and going back to what you said earlier, is that if we suggested what we do collectively, say me and you were working on a project, and this can be for anybody, by the way, when do you plan the project? When do you actually get into the detail of, you know what, this is when we're going to actually try and plan it? The second part would be, well, when are we actually going to need to do something with this and actually implement, uptool, upscale, whatever? But when are we actually going to go and do it? And then really, when could we do some sort of administration tasks?
Yeah.
And at which part within the energy distribution cycle could we get the little wins and go, right, in the morning, if we're saying that 9 o'clock-ish is when me and you would work together, what would good look like from our point of view then?
So, what would good look like? I think that would be where some really productive time needs to be spent. Whereas I think sometimes that particular time period is used for planning.
Yeah.
So maybe is it that that's not not a very productive use of time?
Well, it would suggest, and the energy distribution cycle would suggest that if we are planning, well, let's try and plan in that recovery element. So towards the end of the day, as you're starting to feel that little bit more energetic, or as your energy levels are increasing, naturally, by the way.
Yes.
And if that is happening naturally, well, let's try and embrace that and do things at the right time of the day. Because if it is that I'm trying to do all of the really important, detailed conversations, and me and you are both in the trough, that's going to end up being a longer, harder hour and a half of getting things done. Right? It's not saying you can't get them done.
Yeah.
But it's suggesting that why would you do it then? Why would you not prioritise it and put it into either the peak or towards the end of the recovery?
Yeah.
Because that's when you're going to be more creative. That's when you're going to be in that situation where you can potentially multitask or task switch. You can be in an environment where things are moving at a fast pace, and because you're at your peak, you're in a really good position and people understand you can actually get things done.
Yes.
Into the trough then, what should we be doing? What should we be doing in the times, or what serves us well to be able to do in the trough that we might not have considered before? Well, I'm suggesting, and the energy distribution cycle is suggesting, maybe some administration work. That's where you're replying to emails.
Yes.
And obviously not the really important ones, but the ones that you can just go, yeah, just checked in. Yeah, I've seen this. I put that in my calendar invite. I'll speak to you next week. Whatever that might be.
Simple stuff.
Yes, simple. It's not going crazy, but it's about understanding that you might be experiencing that tough patch. So don't overkill it. Don't put yourself in an environment where you might be even more stressed because you're in the trough with other people and you're trying to get to the bottom of quite a difficult problem, if you like.
Yeah.
I'll ask you, Bernice, are you an early bird?
I wake up early because I have to.
Yeah.
It's not a choice.
So you're a night owl then? Would you consider that?
No, I like my bed. I still I like to be in bed early.
Okay.
To sleep.
Okay.
But I have to force myself to do that.
Right.
Because I could quite easily just sit and get distracted by things.
Now, I am definitely an early bird. But and just to think about that is that if you wanted to do any extra reading, by the way, there's the book out there called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. And there's also Sapiens, which is another great book. We've got that in the office. If you wanted to pop around and have a conversation, maybe have a coffee, we can get into the detail. But understanding that why do we sleep? And it's to obviously keep the tribe safe for as long as possible. So when there's other threats that are threatening our own existence and keeping the species going, it was around the night owls would stay up a little bit later to protect the tribe when it got dark.
Yeah.
And the early birds would let the night owls sleep wake up a bit earlier, and then the time that we are actually at risk is a lot smaller.
Yes.
So, and again, read the books. If you need anything, we can obviously go into the detail around that even more. But from that timings, you've got to think about, if you're a night owl then, Bernice, think about the times where you actually recover. Think about the time. So peak between, on average, 8 and 12.
Yeah.
That trough is between 12 and 3.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's obviously where it's going to be a little bit tougher. And then finally is that recovery.
Yes.
So between 3 and 6.
Yeah.
So if you break those blocks down, and obviously there is going to be different alignments and different people's energy distribution cycle, but it normally stays the same. It doesn't necessarily matter whether you've got a really busy day. You will just manage your trough a little bit better than in other days where you're not as busy between 12 and 3. And remember, it's not an exact science. Everybody's going to be different. So, for example, we've got other people that we've met that they don't peak until even later than yourself, Bernice. And again, think about the people that you work with. Is it that you've got the dragon in the corner that you know you don't speak to till at least 10:30 because they need at least 3 cups of coffee? They're definitely not a morning person. And it is, you have to let them warm up.
Yes.
Because if not, it then becomes a slightly more difficult conversation. I'm not saying you can't have it, but it becomes a little bit more of a difficult conversation. But then you get them right the way to 1 o'clock when they're at peak.
But you're now in your
trough. Now I'm at the trough, and it's like, wow. So when we talk about what does good look like, it's what does good look like from a planning point of view of when you are going to engage with somebody else.
Yeah.
Because I know I'm going to need you at the top of your peak so that then I can get what I need from you.
Yeah.
But understanding that we might be on the sort of other way, you might be on the way down, I might be on the way up. And it's about understanding when to do certain things.
And where do we meet in the middle?
Yeah. So if there's a couple of questions on there, buddy. So really, what can we see from people and I'm going to come to the trough first. So from a communications point of view, when we think about the trough and think about that time frame, so you've just had something to eat, or normally most people have just had something to eat. That's not generalizing, by the way. But what do we see from a communications point of view in the trough? What have we got the potential to see?
Well, I suppose if we're not conscious of the utilization of our time and how we typically spend our energy, let's say, for example, it's 2:00 in the afternoon and we're in a meeting to do lots of kind of big sky thinking. We need to kind of come up with a plan on how we're going to launch this new product, and we need to be really creative. The reality is, based on typical energies, we're not going to be most productive in our own personal thought in that moment to come up with all of these ideas. But from a communications perspective, how's that going to show? Because if we're both in our trough in that period of time and that energy is feeling low, but we're in a situation where we need to really dial it up and think hard, how are we going to communicate? Is it that we might fall into unproductive behavior? That definitely doesn't serve us well, definitely doesn't serve the team well, definitely doesn't have a positive influence on psychological safety. And yeah, it just possibly isn't a best use of time.
Okay, so when we start to look at communication, and again, this is from organisations that we've worked in the past, from the potential organisations we're going to work with in the future, it happens on a regular basis, more than some people know, is that an ad hoc meeting and the expectations of people within meetings at different times of the day, that could be slightly different. So what is our advice for what we see on a regular basis is, well, if you're doing it at this time, what are your expectations? Do you need them at the top of their peak, or is it just more of an admin meeting?
Yeah.
Where and by the way, there is lots of meetings out there, but if it is that you are communicating and having that detailed conversation at someone's potential trough, then we're still trying to expect the best from this person at this time. Are we sort of setting each other up for failure? Now, if we're aware of this, if we're aware of the energy distribution cycle, what's the potential impact for us?
Well, massive potential to enhance productivity. And of course, we know high levels of productivity lead to high levels of performance. But even from a psychological perspective, we're going to have much better communication. We're going to have much better and stronger relationships because we're able to feel good when we're having the right discussions at the right time.
Yeah. So I think when we really look at that recovery element then, and it is or for the energy distribution cycle in total, being aware of what your energy distribution cycle is, so that's for everybody that's listening, what is your energy distribution cycle? What does it look like? When do you peak? Secondly, is there something you need to consider at peak? Then potentially the impact it could have going into the trough. What are you actually doing on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis that actually, from an energy distribution cycle point of view, it doesn't serve you well to have this meeting at this time or engage in this communication, this task at this time?
Yeah.
It would be more beneficial for you to move that to a different part of the day, whichever part you think is going to be most beneficial, and replacing it with something that is more of an administration task.
Yes.
Finally, when do you start the planning for the next day? Well, actually, could we do it in that recovery element just as we're sort of finishing up and tying up loose ends and actually coming back ready to go and hitting your peak first thing in the morning?
Definitely.
When you get there and when it's right for you.
Yes.
So what we've got certain tools that we use at T2, but it's about understanding that we have the stage of the stage of the day which you are planning on implementing things, the time specifically when you're going to go into the detail and actually have these conversations, and then start to list some of the tasks that you may and may not be doing in each different part of the day.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you are making assumptions that you are doing things at the right time of the day and not taking, and you might even be saying, you know what, yeah, we do consider our energy distribution cycle already. Okay, write it down. Write it down, get your evidence for you to say, this is what we do at peak, this is what we do in the trough, and this is what we do in recovery. And as it's laid out, and it's the easiest way to do it, Bernice, when it's all laid out in front of you and you go, well, that actually demands quite a bit more energy. And is there a reason why all of these things in the trough have actually need to be prioritized slightly different?
Yeah.
And guess what? If I'd have just moved that to there, what's the potential impact that it could have on the people that need to be involved in that project, meeting, whatever you want to call it?
Yeah.
But when do you do what?
Yes.
And what is the impact of that?
Yeah. And I think that can be, even just going through that process can have such a significant impact on people, because when I think of prior to T2 and just kind of a typical kind of day working either from home or in the office, I know that I used to spend quite a lot of time planning on a morning, definitely unproductive. And that's when I really felt going into the trough that it was really hard, because then the trough period, so for me, definitely within the afternoon, so I possibly do fall into that very typical average category between 12 and 3. And that's where I'll try and do a lot of problem solving or a lot of kind of big picture thinking. But for a long time, I definitely wasn't using my time, and I think it definitely did impact how productive I was, but also how I communicated with people in certain situations.
And I think when you are feeling tired, it is do something that you actually enjoy doing. And obviously yours is walking the dog, but increase that level of cortisol, which again is something that we need to be aware of, by the way. And there's lots of other research out there. But if it is that we looked at cortisol from a fear, stress, and anxiety levels, well, actually, cortisol is a really good thing when we come to the energy distribution cycle, because it's the bit that keeps you on your toes. It's the bit that gives you that little kick, if you like, to say, right, now it's go time. Our energy's high. Can we be as productive as possible? And that, for some people, is where they hammer 4,000 emails.
Yeah.
Is where they get all their administration. But what we're saying is, or what the energy distribution cycle suggests, is that is there something else that you could be doing at that peak?
Yes.
Not just the emails. And for some people, the emails is the biggest thing. And if that is your most important task, then go ahead and do it in peak. But Is there a discussion? Is there a planning element? Is there something else you could be doing in this time that's going to serve you better than just doing the emails at peak?
Yes.
Okay. So what is our advice to people that are watching? And in regards to the energy distribution cycle, what do we do when?
Yeah.
So number 1, peak. To take advantage of our heightened levels of energy, we recommend during this time period we concentrate on more cognitive tasks, such as problem solving and things that may take a long attention span to complete. It's also about writing reports, attending meetings, carrying out analysis, and when you arrive at work in the morning, make tasks such as these your priority.
Yeah.
What about in the trough, though, Bernice?
So in the trough, so as we know, potentially on average, not for everyone, but between those times of kind of 12 and 3, this is the time where we really need to think about the simple stuff. So the things that are on your agenda that don't need a great depth of detail or even just concentration. So those real simple admin tasks, it might even be that actually they're the things that don't require lots of energy. It might be that this is the moment in time where I have meetings and those meetings are very much around status updates, or we're having information sharing meetings. It's simple, it's easy. So therefore, although I'm going to be in that trough, I'm able to still get stuff done and be productive, but I'm dealing with the simple, easy stuff.
And then finally, recovery. So recovery is a time, on average, between 3 and 6 o'clock. And we talk about periods of time where you can think. Could be idea generation. It could be to do with starting to plan ahead for the next day.
Yeah.
It could be about being creative and coming up with those new ideas that could have an impact on days, weeks going forward.
Yeah.
Idea generation.
Definitely.
So that was a great episode, Bernice. We've got into a lot of detail around the energy distribution cycle. And if you'd like to follow us on any of the socials, you can reach out to the People Performance Podcast. Thank you again for coming into the podcast room with me. And we will see you all next time. Thank you very much.
Cheers.